I gotta feel it, you don't mean it, what you said right now. I gotta feel it, there's something about your eyes.
Hello everybody and welcome to the channel. What is going on? As you can see, this time I'm riding Chinchilla 450. As you know, I rode Napoleon for 50 and I was very surprised because I did not expect much from that bike, and I really like the way I feel on that bike. And this time I'm riding Chinchilla 450, and so far I like this bike as well. One thing to tell you guys is that this bike is pretty much the same as Napoleon 450, but this machine has an option for a pillion or a passenger. And let's brake. Alright, so acceleration isn't crazy. We have 50 horsepower, 45 newton-meters of torque. The throttle is extremely responsive, and what I mean by that is that even though it's a cable throttle, but somehow it feels almost like ride-by-wire, which I like a lot. Look, I just rev it up a little bit and it feels as if the bike listens to everything you do. Alright, so this bike is very torquey when you go slow. Slow speed maneuverability is quite impressive. But later on, when you go, I would say, over 50-60 kilometers per hour, the torque fades away. So this bike would not be very suitable for a highway, I would say. But for a city, this bike is pretty nice. Alright guys, we have a really nice straight line, and it is time for us to measure acceleration. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Alright. This is not the fastest bike, but I mean, this power is pretty decent. Yeah, we're talking about a cruiser here, so this is small to middle displacement cruiser, and the power on this bike is pretty decent, pretty nice. Again, this bike still has 16-liter tank capacity, which is way better than another cruisers I was talking about recently. So the first gear goes all the way up to 65 kilometers per hour or something. The second gear goes up to 92, 95. And the third gear goes all the way up to 110 or something. Alright, so right now, as we can see, there is a car in front of me. I want to overtake the car. Yeah, the power is enough to overtake some cars. It's torquey enough to feel comfortable in traffic like that. This bike doesn't have too much excessive vibrations, which I like, but you can still feel as if this is a cruiser, like a legit cruiser, given that we have V-twin engine, which is big and loud. This is exactly what I expect from a cruiser like that. Now, the engine sounds great, still has some nice vibrations, but not too much. So Bandai is holding their horses in terms of the sound and vibration this time. And I would say that this is a very, very pleasant amount of vibrations and sound. Not like Bandai 500 had. So right now we're going 25, 27 kilometers per hour. And I'll just open the throttle. Are you ready? All right. That was good. When I opened the throttle, it felt almost as if the bike did a tiny wheelie. So the torque is very, very good. 45 Newton meters of torque, guys. Cruisers must be torquey, and this bike has plenty of torque for this displacement, of course. All right, let's check brakes. Ready? 30 kilometers per hour. Okay. Brakes aren't too sharp. I would say it feels as if this is 2-piston caliper, but we have 4-piston caliper to my knowledge. Let's check brakes from 50 kilometers per hour, second gear. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Okay. Pretty good. ABS is not intrusive at all, which is good. So far, brakes are good. Not the sharpest brake performance that I have ever had on those cruisers. But guys, I'll tell you that this bike is not the lightest. And again, braking performance very decent, very good. Bike feels pretty legit. So this bike doesn't have weak spot other than its reliability. Everybody's talking about reliability. I told you about that in my previous video. And one thing I need to mention, my people, is that unfortunately I see that people who buy those bikes, this bike is very new, but people who buy those bikes, they used to sell them, and this second-hand app that we have in China, which is called CNU, has a whole bunch of Napoleons and Chinchillas which are new, but somehow people want to sell them, which tells me that the quality of this bike might be not good. Now I ride this bike and I can tell you that it feels good. It doesn't feel unreliable. It doesn't have some strange noises coming out of different parts. It doesn't feel as if this bike is bad. I really like the gearbox of this bike. Not a single time did I slip into neutral. The clutch lever is very gentle. Of course, this bike has slipper clutch, which I like a lot. Yeah. And clutchless shifting is pretty easy on this bike. It almost feels as if it has a quick shifter. I'm not a big fan of those buttons on the cruisers because I just think that those buttons feel a bit redundant on a cruiser like that. But overall, this bike is very simple. Suspension is very nice. I would not call it soft. I would not call it hard. So I would call it a sweet spot, my favorite phrase, right? But I do feel very comfortable on this bike. I feel as if I can ride it for ages. So far, I spent around 30 minutes riding this bike, and I like it a lot. So this bike is very simple, which actually tells me that there are not too many things that can go wrong with this bike. Even though people tell that this bike is not reliable, but I'm thinking, alright, so this bike has a pretty simple suspension. This bike doesn't have a very complex engine or something. This bike doesn't have too many redundant technologies, even though it has ABS and traction control, which in my opinion is very important to have, especially for a beginner. And this bike is definitely a beginner-oriented motorcycle. So this bike has everything you need. It doesn't have too many redundant technologies like that Benda 500, which is going to get broken like pretty much right away. I think if something gets broken, it'll be pretty easy to fix. Something tells me that this bike is exactly what you're looking for if you're looking for a middle displacement cruiser. One honorable mention, guys, is that the front brake is good, but I would say that on this bike, the rear brake is even more important. Listen, I'll show you. So right now we're going around 45 kilometers per hour, and I'm gonna stop only using rear brake. Ready? Only rear brake. It wasn't bad. Given that you can combine your front brake and your rear brake, I feel like the performance on this Benda is really good. Let me try it out. Ready? Oh yeah, whew, that was good. Yeah guys, if you use two brakes, you'll stop this bike in no time. This is very pleasant. Alright, let me just swerve around like this. I mean, looks pretty good. Again, this bike has 150mm front tire, which on paper has to be very bad for maneuverability, and this bike does feel less maneuverable comparing to CLC 450 or Vogue 525 CU. But overall, compared to other Bendas I've ridden, this bike is so maneuverable. It's so much fun to ride, you just feel relaxed, so you don't have to think about anything. The clutch is very gentle, the gears are very gentle, you can shift gears in no time, no problem whatsoever. The maneuverability is decent enough, and again, given that this is the cruiser, I mean, it's really good to ride. I mean, I feel great about it. My honest opinion is that the simpler the bike is, the less problems you're going to have. And this bike has all the necessary technology. We're talking about traction control and ABS. Again, we don't have adjustable suspension, but the suspension feels really good. Now we have a V-twin engine, which potentially might not be the most reliable engine, but guys, this is the most important part of this bike. It sounds great, it's torquey, it looks good. So if you want to buy a Benda for 50, I would never stop you guys. You know what you want, you know what you're looking for, you know what you're buying. And if I could give you a piece of advice, just try to ride this bike before you buy. It's plenty of torque for the displacement, looks absolutely amazing, sounds great. The throttle is very responsive, gears are very smooth, clutch lever is very gentle, you don't have to stress out about anything. This bike is great, really, I really like it, I really like it. Woohoo! This is one of the best middle displacement cruisers that you can get here in China. This bike is super cheap, 28,000 RMB. Competitors are way less outstanding, I would say. All the competitors, even though the brands are really reliable in my opinion, but they don't have outstanding features like V-twin engine, they don't have this design, they don't have the sound. So there's always a trade-off, and this time the potential trade-off would be reliability. Alright, braking performance once again, ready? Ah, yeah, good. I'm telling you guys, on this bike, rear brake is just as important as the front brake. So 260 millimeter rear disc is very handy, I would say. I really like my body position. I really like the way I feel on this bike. I would say that my arms are a little bit bent. I'm still a bit more leaned over than on CLC 450, I would say. But this position is very nice. Somehow I like it a lot. I am 1 meter 85 centimeters and I feel great on this bike. This bike is low, so the ground clearance is very low. And you feel as if you're very, very close to the asphalt. So if you ride somewhere where asphalt isn't perfect, probably it might be an issue. This time we're talking about Benda 450 Chinchilla, this beautiful machine. I know that you wanted to see this bike, and finally I made it happen. So without a further delay, let's just dig into those small details and I'll let you know what I think about this bike. And my favorite part of this bike, guys, is of course this beautiful V-twin. It does look good. I don't have to talk about the way it looks, of course, because it's all about the way it feels and rides, but something tells me, guys, that this is one of the most outstanding parts of this bike, and not only in terms of its performance, but in terms of its look. I really like the way it feels, I really like the way it looks, and I absolutely love the way it sounds. So we have 50 horsepower, 45 newton meters of torque, the displacement is something around 445 cc, liquid cooled engine, of course, and yeah, this is the most important and outstanding part of this machine for sure. I've told you that Napoleon 450 had a telescopic fork, which is non-adjustable, and this is exactly the same fork, but this time, as you can see, we don't have plastic, so the fork is exposed, and this way it looks way more classic. This suspension is rather soft than solid, which is a good thing for me. And from behind we have a dual shock. This time we don't have a monoshock, we have two springs, one is on the left, one is on the right. And I would say that even though the suspension is not adjustable, but Benda has found a sweet spot, it does feel good and pretty soft. And what truly sets this bike apart from Napoleon is of course its design and the seat. This time, if you have a girlfriend or a boyfriend or a family member, you can just place him behind your back and ride together. Benda Napoleon did not have this feature, and this is pretty much why some people prefer Chinchilla over Napoleon. To be honest, guys, I would say that this bike looks very good and classic, but not as outstanding, not as unique as Napoleon. But again, this is a trade-off. If you're a lonely lion, like some people, you better buy a Napoleon. However, if you're a family guy, this is your option. Chinchilla 450 has 695mm seat height. I would tell you that ergonomic-wise, this bike is very comfortable for pretty much everybody. I am 1 meter 85 centimeters and I feel at home. And some shorter riders feel really good as well. So they did find a sweet spot in terms of ergonomics as well. And one honorable mention, guys, is that once you ride this bike, you are a little bit more leaned over compared to some other cruisers, which I love a lot. It feels as if you have more control of this bike. From the front, Chinchilla 450 looks absolutely awesome. We have this round, nice LED headlight. We have 150mm front tire. We have this really nice classic fender, and from behind Chinchilla has a very nice classic fender, which is bigger than a Napoleon, so if the weather would be bad, if it would be rainy, you're not going to be dirty. And talking about the tire, we have 160mm rear tire. Chinchilla 450 comes equipped with 320mm single disc from the front. Benda claims that this is 4-piston caliper. However, when I stop the machine, the brakes are not very sharp. It feels as if this is only 2-piston caliper. If you know more about that, please let me know in the comment section below. And from behind, we have 260mm single disc. We have 1 or 2-piston caliper. The brakes on this bike are pretty good, but if you want to stop this machine really fast, you need to utilize not only the front brake, but the rear brake as well. And once you utilize those two brakes together, bike stops really well. One strange thing about Chinchilla 450 is that the curb weight of this bike is 196 kilograms, which is 2 kilograms lighter than Napoleon. And of course, guys, we have more parts, more details on this bike, which means that this bike must be heavier, but somehow they managed to make it lighter. Chinchilla 450 has 16-liter tank capacity, which looks very good, and you can ride for a long time, and it's way much better than the competition. This bike is relatively simple, so it doesn't have redundant features, but it still has dual-channel ABS and traction control. And as we can see, this bike is very low, not only in terms of the seat, but in terms of the ground clearance. But as long as you ride on a nice asphalt, this would not be a problem. This time, Benda has a round TFT dash, and I'll show you one thing. If you want to operate, you have to use your finger. So we have a touch screen like this. It's not super bright, so for example right now the bike is on neutral and that little tiny N is barely visible, especially during the daytime like that. Yeah, it sounds great. Alright guys, this was my honest opinion about Benda 450 Chinchilla. Please let me know what you think about this bike in the comment section below. Hope you like this video. If you like it, please let me know. Hit the like button, subscribe to my channel if you didn't. And guys, as always, I'll see you next videos and stay safe. Bye bye everybody.